Doug Platts, welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast.
Thank you for having me. Excited to have the conversation.
Yeah, it is a pleasure to be with you today. You're joining us from Dallas, Texas. I'm south of Salt Lake City in Utah. Today, we're going to be talking about something that's connected to a topic near and dear to my heart. We discuss it all the time on the podcast. That is corporate wellness, individual team wellness. But we're going to take a slightly different angle today. And that is really where you and your business come in. We're going to be talking about leveraging gardening as a benefit towards wellness, to promote wellness within individuals, teams, and organizations. And I just find that super fascinating. So I'm excited to explore all of that with you. As we get started, I wanted to share Doug's bio with everybody. Doug Platt is COO of Retail Technology. I'm going to start that over. Today, as the COO of Retail and Technology startup Gardenuity, Doug Platt drives business growth and defines scalable operations to support a growing customer base and product range. He helps lead growth and partnerships with companies across the U.S., bringing the mental, physical, and social wellness benefits of gardening to employees and key clients through workshops and garden-inspired gifts. I just think that's so fascinating. Frankly, it's not something I've really thought about before, how to leverage gardening for these various aspects of wellness, as was mentioned in your bio, the mental, the physical, and the social. So it's a pleasure to have you. Anything else you would like to share with listeners by way of your background or personal context before we dive on in?
Yeah, I love product companies. I love kind of getting in and kind of helping build scale growth. I grew up in the Highlands of Scotland and have always had an affinity with gardening. And this was a company when I met them and met the two co-founders, Donald Latier and Julie Eggers. It was just a light bulb moment of, okay, instead of thinking about how we bring this to market just as an e-commerce brand, there's a benefit here that we can bring to companies that is not just unique in the marketplace, but actually is impactful in those three areas of mental, physical, and social well-being. And so it was one of those situations where I had to join the company and had to kind of be part of bringing this to companies across the US.
Yeah, I love it. And for anyone who's watching the video feed, just your background.
Yeah, tune into YouTube.
It's inspiring to me as I see your background with the bags of plants and various gardening items and such. And like you said, from an e-commerce standpoint, you have the gardening gifts. I think that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. It's one of those unique things as a perk you could send to people. I've heard of organizations, people sending door dashing during a remote team meeting so people get food and such. Doing swag or gardening from the e-commerce side makes total sense. But what I love is that you've extended that to really talk about more holistically the benefits of gardening. Now, I must also say from the outset, as I think about myself and my background, my upbringing, I don't have tons of fond memories of working with my hands in the yard. I remember Saturday morning chores, going out, weeding, doing all that kind of stuff. It wasn't something I loved, something we just kind of did so that we could get on with our day. And now as an adult, with my own yard, I tend to be more of a minimalist when it comes to outside yard work. And so I find this extra intriguing because on the one hand, I'm like, do I really want to go work in my yard? On the other hand, when I get out and work with my hands in the earth, there's just something, a satisfaction that comes from that I can't deny. Maybe you could speak to that before we really even dive on in further.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of the people that we work with grew up in more of a in the country in a more remote area where they did garden, or they had parents or grandparents that farm. They now live in cities where they have limited outdoor space, and it brings back a little bit of reminiscing to that time that they spent with those individuals. But also, we ship everything as kits. We want you to engage in the act of gardening. There's companies out there that send plants that you just put on your desk or put outside on your balcony, and you can enjoy them. But we believe that there are so many benefits that come from the act of gardening, as well as enjoying the fruits of your labor, whether that's an outdoor herb veggie garden, a desktop garden. And so we do want people to engage in digging in the dirt. We talk a lot about getting dirty here. It's not just for kids. And I think you kind of forget that as you get older, that there are a lot of benefits that come from digging your dirt. We don't include gloves for that particular reason as well. And the benefits have been documented for years about the impact that gardening has on your well-being. And even back in 2019, so pre-pandemic, and I think that's worth noting, we did not strategically move into this way as part of the pandemic, but we were there ahead of the pandemic, ahead of the urgency to kind of bring teams together remotely through virtual workshops. But we saw that this was, and you mentioned earlier, perk. We see this as a benefit versus a perk. For me, beer in the fridge is a perk. A benefit is something that actually meaningfully impacts me mentally, physically, socially, so that I become a better person on the other side of that.
Yeah. Oh, well, and thank you for that distinction. And when I said perk, I actually meant just like the item. So like if you send someone like a potted plant that they put on their desk, or you send it to them at home to help them feel connected with the rest of the team, I see that, as kind of the standalone kind of perk. But what you're talking about is, again, much more holistic, right? We're talking about something
activity-based, and I think
activity-based, holistic, something that you can integrate into kind of your daily routine, your daily habits, right? And I do see that as something far more substantial than some kind of one-off little perk. Yeah. And so I appreciate that distinction, because I think that is really key. And I think when I think about myself and I think about like, what are those things that I do that really have an impact on my well-being? It's those things that I do consistently over time. So for me, for example, longtime listeners of the podcast will have heard me talk about walking my dogs. I am like devoted and religious about walking my dogs at least twice a day, taking them to the park, getting that time with them out in nature. That's something that I'm just super consistent with. Now, everyone's different though. So like some people don't even have pets, right? Or they don't want pets. That's fine. For me, walking my dogs is a big thing. For other people though, something like this, that you can wake up, you can start your day, you could spend, it doesn't take tons of time, but you just spend a little bit of time working with your hands in the earth. And that just becomes a consistent part of your day. And then you start to see the fruits of your labors and the benefits that come, the satisfaction, the benefits that come from that. I mean, there's just so many things if you just get consistent with it.
We strategically integrate mindful moments into our garden. So a good example is the best way to get a good night's sleep starts in the morning by going outside, getting some vitamin D, whether that's walking your dog or going outside and tending to your garden. Best time to water your garden is in the morning. Best time to harvest is in the morning as well. Even if you're going to be using the herbs or the peppers or tomatoes or whatever you're growing at the end of the day, the best time is actually to harvest in the morning. So getting outside, getting that vitamin D, getting your cup of tea, your cup of coffee, and enjoying that. And then with our desktop gardens, we include little habits. So we have like a little mister that you mist it in the morning before you boot up the computer, and you take a moment to think of a few things that you're grateful for. We talk a lot about growing gratitude here. And so it is integrating those easily accessible mindful moments into your workday will cumulatively have an impact on how you approach both the day, but also work in its entirety as well.
Yeah. I love that. I think that's fantastic. So we've already really talked about gardening as a benefit and why Gardenuity and gardening experience can have such a big impact in individual wellness. I think that is huge. I'd love to pick your brain a little bit more about really how you see the role of HR shifting, the benefits landscape, for example. This is one that, I frankly hadn't really thought about until we were preparing for this podcast interview. I think it's ingenious, and there are other benefits coming about. So what do you see in terms of that landscape, post pandemic, as we're trying to connect?
Absolutely. And I think, every day there's more and more research or articles that come out that talk about how at the forefront of executives' focus is the mental, physical, and social well-being of their employees. Deloitte published just last week a great report about the importance of mental well-being and how it is at the forefront of the C-suite. but there is a disconnect between how much the C-suite believe they are supporting an employee's mental well-being versus how much they actually are. And I think there is that risk of, hey, we have these beautiful benefits that are listed on our website or listed on any job application, but if people aren't using them, if people aren't engaged in them, and if they're not also creating connective tissue between your employees, then there's no benefit there. It's just it's a list of, nice to haves. The Forbes also put out an article of the top 10 things employee benefits are looking at in the time of a recession. So we just came out of a pandemic, now we're in a recession. And so our mental stresses and well-being is not diminishing in any way, but mental health, employee programs, and well-being services are at the top of that. And we actually work with all the major health insurance providers. So they use us as a part of their wellness programs that they cater to their client base. And so what's been interesting is that we have helped both through the pandemic, but even post-pandemic, bring teams together, whether they're fully remote, whether they're fully hybrid, whether they're back in the office. It also is a way to create new conversation within that organization as well. With our outdoor gardens, we see these groups organically meet weeks and months later to do harvesting and share recipes, and it creates a different type of culture. And culture has evolved over the last 2 years, and culture is being redefined again, even post-pandemic. And this has been a way that's been at the forefront of doing it. It is very easily accessible. It is something that actually everyone wants to grow plants, whether that's indoors or herbs and veggies. When we do virtual workshops and we do these coast to coast for hundreds of people at a time, the sign-up rate it's like a concert. People register in a very quick period of time, and they're excited about it. And then they turn up to these virtual workshops and they're engaged. And then afterwards, the conversations and photos that get shared. And so you are creating a different type of culture, and you're creating engagement. Whereas before, people might sign up for stuff but not turn up. They might turn up but not have their cameras on. They might not have a conversation. You're creating this buzz and energy. And what this doing is showing that HR leaders, chief people officers, head of wellness benefits within organizations are becoming even more strategically important as we come through the pandemic and to the other side. Because if we don't care for the well-being of our employees, they're going to burn out, and then that's going to not be positive for the company. And it's going to affect everybody in the broader scheme of things as well. We talk about burned out employees are going to burn out their planet. And a lot of companies focus on the well-being of the planet, but then they forget about the well-being of their employees. And this is a great way to show that you care and show that you can be engaged in this as well. And you don't need to do a virtual workshop to build the gardens, but they've just been even now, 3 years after virtual workshops became a thing, they are more popular than ever if you are successful in driving engagement during that workshop. And what's great is different seasons based on your location, different gardens match to you, so you can enjoy different gardens. We have companies do programming with us each quarter, sometimes outdoor gardens, sometimes indoor gardens, and it is usually at the top of a lot of HR leaders' list of things to kind of lock in for the following year. And so it's been fun to be part of helping people get through the pandemic in what way we can, helping companies evolve their culture and their team integrations, and then also afterwards being part of their improved mental and physical and social well-being as well.
Yeah, so fun, so much interesting stuff to unpack there. And one of the words you kept on saying over and over again was engagement. So you have the wellness components that we've already been discussing in terms of the mental, physical, emotional wellness and well-being of your people, but also just from the standpoint of this, when you're in an online, remote or hybrid kind of a work environment, and you're trying to connect with people through space, right? To be able to have a way to connect people in an engaging way is really important. And so your primary goal may even just be, I just want people to show up, pay attention, and be part of the process of whatever this meeting is we're going to have. And so part of that is, let's add in some new, interesting, engaging kind of component or element to get people energized and participative. And I think this is great for that purpose as well. You just get people really excited.
Yeah, just to touch on that, the Wall Street Journal just put out an article that employers are looking at those first 90 days of onboarding, and they know they've seen that it is absolutely critical for long-term retention, so that they're not constantly trying to fill roles. And if they can win in those 90 days, they keep that employee for a year plus, which means that they can focus on the next recruitment piece. And so if you can drive engagement and connections through that time, so I'm just not at the other side of a laptop and never really get to meet my colleagues or people in my peers or my seniors, then you're probably going to not have that affinity to stick around, that loyalty, and so you might just move on to the next thing. But if we can create those onboarding experiences, and we talk a lot about with our kids onboarding the plants, but it is the same as onboarding employees. You want to make sure they've got a solid foundation, they've got the perfect home matched to them, they have the right nutrients, the right care, and the regular check-ins as well throughout their growing journey. And that's the same for new employees, whether they're straight out of university or they're more senior executives getting to know their teams. We work a lot with law firms and their summer associate programs. Even though they're back in person, they see this as a great way virtually to do as an activity. And what we've also seen with our workshops is it engages the family unit. So we always say, open the doors, let kids, pets, and partners in. We work a lot with companies that actively send multiple kits to somebody's house so their partner or their kids can get involved. And you don't get that when you do work events in the office. It is literally, you get to know the employees, which is great. But when you get to know the family unit and you start to build connective tissue there, that becomes part of your ecosystem, your personal ecosystem. And that helps with increased retention. But also, if people know you a little better, that increases that affinity with that organization as well.
Yeah, and part of it perhaps is a life stage thing. But when we talk about wellness and the holistic wellness of individuals, so much of that is that social support component that we need. And we know there's lots of research that talks about the importance of having colleagues who you trust, who you can confide in, who you even feel you would even consider as friends at work. And we know people stay largely due to relationships that they have at work, or they leave largely due to bad relationships that they have at work. And so that social component is huge, and that's hard to do when you're fully remote. And so finding ways to get people to connect socially through something like this, I think, is fantastic. And as I was starting my thought, I was thinking about my family. So this is a life stage thing, but I'm in my mid 40s. I'm married, I have children, and I'm past the stage of, I want good collegial relationships with people at work. I want even people who I would consider to be friends at work. But I'm past the stage of having the time to socialize, say, go get a drink out after working hours with people, right? Because I want to go home to my wife and kids. But for younger people, maybe that's what derives a lot of value for them in those social relationships at work. Maybe different life stage, you have different needs. And so when you start to bring in this kind of a component where you can engage the entire family, then you start to meet people where they're at a particular life stage, and not just assuming that everyone has the same needs, and that, what may have worked, for a certain segment of your workforce at one point in their life is going to continue to work. I know I'm thinking now primarily pre-pandemic, because things have become much more flexible during the pandemic and where we're at today. But pre-pandemic, I just remember in the last decade so many times that there was some sort of a work event that I would love to participate in, but it was not family inclusive. And so I would have to make the decision. Is this one, I feel like maybe it's a +1, so I can take my spouse with me. We'll have a great date night. That's wonderful. Is that something we can do? Find a babysitter to take care of the kids, versus, balancing that with other times. No, really, I would love to do this if I can bring my family with me. And sometimes the organization would be accommodating to that. Other times they wouldn't be. And so, again, I just think the flexibility of this kind of an approach and engaging people where they're at, I think, is tremendous. Again, the holistic wellness of individuals, getting your hands dirty, working in the earth, that has mental, psychological benefits. The social component of gardening, of course, has huge benefits. The physical components. I love the holistic nature of this,
Yeah.
and whether we're talking about gardening, or if we can think creatively about other types of holistic approaches to wellness, I think, that's what we need more of in organizations, so that we can have healthy people doing meaningful work that contributes to the bottom line of the company, but also helps the individual find meaning and fulfillment.
Exactly. And I think, we talk a lot about seasonal eating and food as medicine here as part of our workshops and as part of the communication that goes out supporting the garden. It's worth noting, when you garden with us, we have a whole support system and email communication that goes around your particular garden. So it's fun recipes, because we want you to use it, and fun ways to incorporate wellness into your day, into your week, and so on. But we do talk a lot about exploring seasonal eating. So you're not just eating the same 8-10 meals over a 2-week period and a couple of takeaways in between that, but you want to thinking about, well, basil is a summer herb, so I'm going to incorporate that into my diet during the summer, and I'm going to incorporate something else, leafy greens, maybe more into the fall, which grow better in that. And so it kind of challenges you to change it up. But then as a family unit, it challenges you to explore ways to bring each other together. If you are ones that tend not to eat together or cook together, gardening is a fun way to engage the younger members of the family and bring it into the kitchen as well, so that it can help affect at home and at work as well. And as we see more and more companies doing hybrid, we are seeing more office plants enter the workplace. And I think that's some of the things that happened during the pandemic that people loved, in air quotes, that is being taken into the office, that you do need more plants in the office. There's a lot of research and that shows that hospitals are having larger windows, because having visibility into the world and nature is better for your well-being. And so bringing plants into the office space is absolutely key. You want easy to care for plants, because there's nothing worse than dead plants in the office. And so we strategically think about, well, what are easy to care for plants? So if you are hybrid, if you're only in a couple of days a week, they'll be totally fine in between that. But also you can just take them home as well. So they're very portable and easy to do as well. But also, going back to the conversation of work events historically, with a much more distributed workforce, where there's a probably, and I think Yelp just kind of did a commentary around how they're going to just go 100% remote. They're getting rid of all of their physical office space. So you're not even going to have people in the same city, state, or even region of the US. So how do you bring them together? How do you create that connective tissue? We're working with companies who, when they acquire companies, and there's a lot of tension there. I've been both sides of that during my career. How do you bring those teams together? And so gardening workshops are a great way to kind of grow together. It's a great way for the senior executives to share their thoughts at the start of these workshops. But they're also great gifts. We work with some of the big consulting firms, and they don't do workshops because they're so busy, but they send out these gifts. We have a superhero garden that they love sending out. And so there are different ways in which you can bring the gift of gardening and the engagement from gardening to teams. It doesn't have to be a virtual workshop, but they're just a great way to do it. But the experience of gardening is the most important thing.
Yeah, I love it. Doug, this has just been a fascinating conversation. I know at the time I'm going to have to let you go here in a few more minutes. But before we wrap up for today, I just wanted to give you a chance to share with listeners how they can get connected with you, find out more about your work, find out more about the team, how they can get in contact and get the process started to utilize this in their own businesses, and then give us the final word on the topic for today.
Yeah, absolutely. So gardenuity.com is the best place to kind of discover Gardenuity. There's a corporate page where you can find out more about specifically what we do in that space, but you can explore all the gardens. I'd absolutely recommend checking out Instagram and Gardenuity on there. We're at Gardenuity. We do regular Instagram lives. That's our version of our podcast, where we talk with wellness, mixologists, chefs, ways to utilize the garden as well. And I'm also more than happy for anyone to reach out directly to me. I'm Doug at gardenuity.com, and I manage all of our corporate relationships as well. And I think the thing that I want to leave you with is that there are numerous wellness and well-being benefits that come from the act of gardening, and HR leaders, wellness benefit leaders within organizations are being tasked with how do we address mental health challenges within our workplace? How do we evolve our culture in constantly changing times? And gardening has been proven through the work that we've done, but also through research, third-party research, to bring people together in more social ways that help positively impact their mental and physical well-being as well.
I love it. Thank you, Doug. It has just been a pleasure. I encourage listeners to reach out, get connected, find out more about what Doug and his team can do for you in your workplace wellness initiatives. And as always, I hope everyone can stay healthy and safe, that you can find meaning and purpose at work each and every day. And I hope you all have a great week.